patient with us. Where are we dawdling to? We're dawdling while we. I just sent tag and buried. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to call the Elementary and Secondary Subcommittee of Education to order. We've got a number of bills. How many bills we got, Susan? 12 bills, and we have caucus at 11:15. So I just want to tell everybody we've spent a lot of time discussing these bills already. So if you can be brief and short and to the point, we don't need to hear the same point made over and over again. That would be helpful as we're trying to move this docket forward. So I have a queue, and the first person I see in the queue is Delegate Dudenheffer, and I saw him walk in. Which one do you want to do first, Delegate Dudenheffer? You got 1690 and 1757.
Let's do 1690.
All right, so House Bill 1690 is before us, which is the Preschool Initiative Local Matching Fund. Delegate Dudenheffer.
What the bill does is eliminate the matching requirement by the local school districts in receiving the grant that comes with the BPI. What we found is there's a number of schools now that are not qualifying because they physically can't afford the matching funds. So there is what I think is kind of a erroneous, but somebody calculated it on a financial impact statement on this, but it calculated, I think, and I don't have it in my folder here, but about $42 million in loss. That's if every single county out there that gets the matching funds don't put up any money to the program. That would be the total, but that's not going to be the case, I don't think, here. But I think this also affords flexibility to the local school boards that are even doing the matching now.
So, Delegate Dudenheffer, how many of our school divisions don't put the matching fund, don't have the matching funds, and don't put the matching funds in? Yeah?
117 eligible, 92 are participating.
That's 825. Do you agree with that, Susan?
Mr. Chairman, I think the 92 that are participating, I don't know that all of them are having difficulty or cannot come up with a local match, which I think is what the question was. So.
Well, if they're participating, they can come up with a local match.
Right, right.
But it could be taken away from other programs.
And the other ones, they just may not want a four-year program for a variety of reasons. So, yeah.
So we would, in essence, we would be rewarding those who are not willing to put up their local match.
I don't think not willing is a good way to depict it, because we have school districts that survive almost on a daily basis funding-wise. I would challenge saying that down in Southwest.
Susan?
If I might, Mr. Chairman, ask the patron a question regarding the existing programs today. If, in fact, the localities were to remove their local match, how would those classrooms and teachers continue to go forward with the employment and or offering those same number of slots?
If it's all right, I have Jim Council from Prince William who brought the bill forward with me. He can be very specific on his situation.
Chairman Jim Council, representing Prince William Schools, and Ms. Hogue, I'll try and get to your question in a moment, but let me just quickly say we looked at the numbers, and there are a number of school divisions who are not fully participating, and it looks like maybe there's approximately 30%, 6,000 or 7,000 kids that are in eligible school divisions but are not getting the service. So that was the premise with which we started, and we said, how can we get more kids in? And yes, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead and finish.
And so we said, how can we get more kids in? And we said, well, okay, there are basically two reasons divisions aren't participating. Because of the local match, or they don't have adequate physical facilities. I can't tell you how many are not participating because of the lack of facilities. But anyway, we said, all right, we've got these kids there that are not participating. At least if we got rid of the match, and you assume what you want on a given division's LCI, but we can get about 2/3 of a kid for the same amount of state money in the program. So multiply that by X amount of dollars, and we could significantly increase the enrollment in the program. And that's the starting point and why we suggested that we do away with the local match. Now, the fiscal impact statement assumes that if you did away with it, what was it, Ross Perot called it, that giant sucking sound, that the local money is just, to the extent of about $42 million, is just going to disappear. Well, you know, I can't assure you that it would not decrease, but I can only tell you that just about every school division is spending more on SOQ than what is actually required of them. And there are also a lot of school divisions where the pre-K is much more than the statewide per pupil cost of $6,100. So we have a lot of evidence here that I think school divisions are willing to cough up more money than they're absolutely required to do. Now, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Hogue, I've forgotten your question.
Ms. Hogue may restate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I was just trying to figure out, again, on a per pupil basis, if you have, you know, X number of children in a classroom and the local match goes away and the localities pull out their $42 million, which they may, that's optional to them to do so, then I don't know how you'd be able to keep going and offer the same number of slots and employ the same number of teachers to do that.
Mr. Chairman, if you start with the assumption that all the local money is just going to be immediately withdrawn from the program, Ms. Hogue is right. You're not going to be able to maintain the number of teachers. But I think there's evidence out there of what school divisions do on their own in terms of spending, so that assumption is not necessarily a reliable one.
Delegate Landis.
Ask the delegate member, Mr. Council, when we set up this fund originally, the idea was that localities would have skin in the game and the state would share in that cost. We never intended that the state would be funding the entire amount. But what we're doing with this, from a budgetary standpoint, is saying the state's going to cover the entire cost. So what's the prohibition that in the future, localities are going to say, okay, we've used up all these funds because we're just having the state provide the funding now. There's no match requirement. And then more localities are going to say, we want to take advantage of that, which is great, but we've got limited resources. And that was the reason for the match in the first place.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Landis, if I were originally designing the program, I would suspect I would have done it just as you did. But I'm sitting here today and looking at the participation numbers. So my starting point is, okay, why are there approximately 6,000 kids that are not in this program? And how can we, at this point in time, get them in the program? So
I got an answer for that.
I still come back to where we perhaps disagree, and that is on the assumption that the localities, once they're able to, are just going to stop contributing to the program.
Any other questions up here? Any other questions down there? Anybody else in favor of this bill? And please be brief because we're working on a pretty tight schedule.
Mary Jo Fields with the Virginia Municipal League. I'd just like to echo what Mr. Council said about local government support for the preschool program, and that isn't going to disappear. We spend well beyond the required local match and local effort for virtually all the programs, $3.8 billion, in fact, in FY16. So we appreciate your consideration. This would allow those very stressed localities to be able to participate in early childhood, which will increase the children's success in school later on. Thank you.
Brevity, please.
Tom Smith, Superintendent's Association. We're in support for the reasons stated.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Katie Boyle with the Virginia Association of Counties, and I'll just associate myself with the previous speaker's remarks. Thank you.
Anybody want to speak in opposition to the bill? This bill is a walking advertisement for something Delegate Cox, Delegate Reese, and I care a lot about, which is our pilot programs. I mean, the two problems with pre-K is Delegate Dudenhofer and Mr. Council point, not enough space and not enough money. So we do have 5 pilots going on around the state where the private Virginia Early Childhood Foundation we're working with is providing space, and then we're trying to expand my Education Improvement Scholarship bill to provide the funding for K-12 in a private setting. So the bill is a walking advertisement for those pilot programs. Delegate Landis.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion.
Delegate
I
Landis.
move that we table the bill.
Is there a second? It's been moved and properly seconded that we table House Bill 1690. All in favor of that motion will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye, you're opposed, or aye, you support? Nay, you support the motion? Yeah, okay. So there's 1 nay. Thank you, Delegate Dudenhofer. You got one more bill, too, I believe.
1757.
1757. Delegate Dudenhofer.
We're living in a world now where a student at school can't take an aspirin or a Tylenol without some supervision. What we found, and I've been working with the nurses over the summer, is that the number of schools that either share a nurse or don't have a nurse is really an unacceptable level. The bill, we amended it to conform with the Board of Education's recommendations on a study that they did. So it requires one nurse per 550 students, or one nurse per school. The financial impact statement that they provided, and down to it.
Chairman.
They said it was $6,700,000. I think the calculations, we spend about $60 million, a little over $60 million for financing nurses right now. My calculations came in at a little over $1.8 million. I think that's a small price to pay for the safety of our children that are out there, and there are a number of nurses in the audience that would like to speak to this. But it's, again, we're in a different world than when you and I went to school. Much different world.
Delegate Cox.
This might be a question for Susan. Susan, it seems like these would affect mainly low enrollment type of schools. And talk a little bit about the local match that would be required, because obviously that would restrain a little bit.
Yes, sir. Thank you. For the smaller school divisions, if they have, 1 nurse per building versus 1 per 550 students, it would cost, we roughly spend about $43,000 as prevailing cost for a nurse. Localities would have to come up with their side of the local match. Currently, the state spends about $61, $62 million a year on school nursing and healthcare services, and reporting back to the department. And so it would more than likely put a huge impact on those small school divisions that currently don't have a school nurse. They just wouldn't be able to afford it. And they have other ways and other means of being able to provide the services. As I mentioned, some of those school divisions do partner with the local health departments, and that would not count under the provisions of this bill for a school nurse. So, and the locality is working to provide that service, and now the school division has to provide it and hire the person. And they don't be able to come up with a person.
I think Fairfax County right now actually contracts out their nursing services, but it doesn't require that the person who comes in be a nurse, a trained nurse. So they're not sure what kind of quality of the people that are actually being paid and contracted that are out there. So I think the nurses that are here will better be able to explain from a personal standpoint exactly what they see as the situation.
Delegate Cox.
Delegate Dudenhofer, right? And certainly I know the chairman's got a lot of the nurses to speak. I don't think you're going to end up with a lot of questions from us on the value of nurses. I think where you're going to end up with the problems for us is a local match and probably the direction this bill goes in, because this subcommittee is trying to make a concerted effort, and I think the chairman's trying to make a concerted effort probably going the other direction, not so much sort of mandating ratios. as in trying to create flexibility. So if you sort of see what we've done over the last few years, it's tough because whether it's dyslexia or whether it's whatever other thing, it really is a very good cause. Once we start putting all those types of things, we sort of find out where we were several years ago, where we had very little flexibility. So really, our mantra has been, and you can see with the return to the lottery, is to basically sort of return money to the localities and let them make these choices instead of us making them up there. So it's not a matter of, I think anyone that's been in the school system that's had valuable nurses is. I think it's a matter of, once we start getting in this business again of, mandating ratios, et cetera, we end up with that problem. So I think it's more of a philosophical issue than it is. We don't understand the importance of nurses, but it's just generally that's.
Mr. Chairman, if I could respond just quickly, is many of the bills that I put in have to do with safety for kids, and it should be perfectly obvious why that's a very important subject for me. In this case, we are not providing a medical service by a professional in many of the schools that we have out there, and that's a safety issue for me. So,
Anybody else have any questions up here? All right, Debbie McQuinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure how we, who answers this question, but how is those programs monitored now? I mean, I am just like Delegate Duhefner, very concerned, and obviously everybody here are concerned about the safety of children, especially of all the challenges that they're faced with now with allergies and, just many challenges and issues. So how do we monitor the program? How is the program monitored at this time?
Thank you,
from
Susan.
a state perspective.
Susan, you're in the best spot to answer that question.
I attempt to just address the issue in terms of, to my understanding, we don't have a specific audit or benchmark for the school divisions and their nurses to bench up to in terms of what their qualifications are. But in order to be a school nurse, you have to have certain qualifications. But in terms of whether or not they use a school nurse or they've trained some office staff or someone and or use a local health department, I think it's the local school division's discretion to work out the best arrangements they can to have the qualified staff to handle the needs of those students in their buildings. That sort of gets to your question.
if I can comment on that, probably the last time I'll ever present to this board, and I can tell you it's awful convenient sometimes when we invoke giving local government the options and what to do, and sometimes how heavy-handed we come down on those local governments all the time. So,
Do you have some nurses? Do you have some nurses that want to speak, or somebody wants to speak? And please be brief. I don't mean to rush you, but we've been 20 minutes into the meeting. We've only gotten through 2 bills, and we have 55 minutes to get through 10 bills left.
I understand.
Thank you.
My name is Debbie Eric. I'm the nursing program director for Bryant Stratton College. I have 35 years experience as a nurse, a part of that being a school nurse, but today I don't want to talk to you as a nurse. I want to talk to you as a parent. I am the parent of 6 children, the grandparent of 8. I have had the fortune to live in California, Illinois, and Indiana, and all of those states have laws that put school nurses in every building. The problem with not having that ability, that oversight by the state, is that then school nurses are not in buildings, and as a result, our children are not safe. I would wager that the public in Virginia do not know that at the public school their children go to, there is not a school nurse. Because the assumption is the person in the school nurse's office is a nurse. That puts our children in danger. I want to speak from experience just for a second as a nurse. As a school nurse, I was able to intervene in the life of a 7-year-old child whose teacher was telling the parents that this child didn't like math, and as a result of not liking math, after lunch every day, the child would complain of a stomach ache. So as the nurse, I went out on the playground and observed that child. She didn't play with the other children. She was sitting by herself, not being very active. I called her into the school nurse's office. I assessed her. She had rebound tenderness on assessment. I called her mother. She went to the emergency room. That afternoon, she had her appendix out. If she had stayed at school, she might have had a ruptured appendix. School nurses save lives of children every day. Every child deserves a school nurse.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak briefly in favor of the bill? Please, briefly, please.
Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, Jim Council, and I would just say, perhaps this wine's being served before it's time, but it is coming fast on us. The Federal Department of Justice, Federal Department of Education are intervening in situations all over the country, including Virginia, where they're saying school is not providing proper accommodation for kids with special health care needs. So I'll just want to call your attention to the fact it's coming. Thank you.
One of my nurses.
Thank you. I wanted to thank you for letting me speak. My name is Dana Holiday Hollifield. I'm sure you've all received my emails and are aware of who I am and that I'm a national certified school nurse. But I'm actually here as a parent also. My son is right now going through a situation where he's being possibly diagnosed with a seizure disorder. I am very concerned that if he does not have the appropriate care, and he also has asthma, if he does not have a licensed professional to assess him, because assessment cannot be delegated, and the people that are these health aides have a minimum of a GED. At least with your substitute teachers, they have a college degree. So your subs for your health aides don't even have to have a college degree. And some of the largest offenders of not having a nurse in a school are some of the wealthiest counties in the state of Virginia, if not the country. So I am begging you to make sure that my son has access to the appropriate emergency care in school. As a parent in Virginia, I am asking and I am begging. The appropriate care is not there. And I speak as a professional who has experienced it firsthand. You are going, it's not if you lose a child, it's when you lose the next one. Thank you.
These went by and yours is never.
Hi, my name is Cindy Kirby. I'm with the Virginia Education Association, and because these are the recommendations of the Board of Education to keep our children safe and that all kids deserve a school nurse, we support this. Thank you.
Anybody in here speak in opposition to the bill?
Right.
Hey, you got Mr. Smith coming up there.
Mr. Chairman, Tom Smith, Superintendent's Association. We appreciate the comments from Delegate Cox. Our job as superintendents, once you pass something like this, is to go do it. And so with this, with these requirements, it's not only a financial impact to the local level, but in many parts of the state, we wouldn't be able to find the nurses to do it. Hospitals often can't find the appropriate staff. I'm not sure how we would find it for the schools. So for those reasons, we oppose the bill and ask that you not fund it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Michael Malloy, Fairfax County Schools, and for the reasons that Dr. Smith cited, and also some of the things that Ms. Hogue mentioned in terms of the partnership with the local health department, we are very concerned about this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody up here have any other questions? Delegate Cox?
Reluctantly, I have to move to lay the bill on the table.
Is there a second? All right, it's been moved and properly seconded that we lay House Bill 1757 on the table. All in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Doris, you? Aye. So 1757 is unanimously laid on the table. Thank you, Delegate Dudner.
Thank you.
Dickie Bell, you are next in the line, but Ben Klein's got a bill I think that'll go pretty quickly, and he's right behind you. Do you mind if we let Ben just kind of come and go really quickly, or is that? I'm suggesting yours is a little more involved than his is. How about that? All right, so Delegate Klein, how about House Bill 2395?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank the subcommittee for their work on this issue. Both you and Delegate Greason and the entire subcommittee have been leaders on making sure that we can identify dyslexia at an early age. The funding that you provided last year to ensure that incoming teachers receive training on identifying early signs is already working, and this new bill would ensure that one reading specialist in those localities that have chosen to have reading specialists have training in that identification and can serve as a point of contact for parents, for teachers, and for anyone with questions about how to identify early signs and whether the signs they're seeing are indicators. So the bill is before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Delegate Klein, as you and I have discussed, I mean, the discretion resides with the local school boards about hiring these full-time reading specialists. And then your language says basically, and your intent is, if the school boards do employ that person shall have the dyslexia training that the Department of Education is going to make available on its website for free, and there'll be other areas that they can get that training for free. Is that not? So you're saying if they employ them, then they must have the training. Is that the intent of your bill?
That is the intent, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the clarification.
Okay, so I have a line amendment that you and I have discussed, and I think just clarifies that, and it adds that word "if" on line 68 after specialist. So as it reads now, it says one reading specialist employed. With the line amendment, it would say one reading specialist, if employed by Luke, shall have the training, so on and so forth there. So my understanding, Delegate Klein, is you view that as a friendly amendment.
I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Move the amendment.
Second. So the amendment's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor of the amendment to House Bill 2395 will say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Amendment is adopted. Any questions from anybody up here? If you are in favor of House Bill 2395 as amended, would you please stand?
Mr. Chairman, it happens to be Dyslexia Day on the Capitol, and members of Decoding Dyslexia are here in support of the bill.
Thank you all for being here. I mean, I have dyslexia in my family, and I'm guessing that others have the same issue out there. We get dyslexia. We are intent on helping the kids. Thank you all very much for being here today. If you all would sit down, I would appreciate that. If anybody's opposed to House Bill 2395, would they come forward or stand? Oh, wow, Delegate Klein, you don't have anybody in, wait a minute, always one. Yes, ma'am.
Carolyn Seward with Virginia State Reading Association. We're not opposed to the bill. We believe these youngsters need help desperately. However, there are school psychologists in the schools who we believe can fulfill part of the function of this bill. And the reading specialist training, I'm not sure that can be done online, like the Orton-Gillingham or the Wilson, which are methods that they use with dyslexic children. I think it's a little more intense training than they could do online.
My understanding is the Department of Susan, you want to expand on that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just remind the subcommittee members and the audience that last year, some of the action taken by the General Assembly was to provide a staff person at the Department of Education $257,000 for the person and for the development of a module for dyslexic training and ongoing costs of $157,000 each year for that very purpose. And that, with that understanding, thinking that type of training would also be applicable and useful for the reading specialists to avail themselves of.
I'm sorry, I thought that was awareness training of dyslexia, which would be different from someone who would be doing a methods.
Taking it to the next level of training, right.
Thank you, Ms. Seward. Anybody else want to speak in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Klein, want to wrap it up?
Someone who is not an unfamiliar face to the committee or to the House, Chris White, would just like to introduce his children, if he may.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. I'm Chris White with the Vector Corporation. I'm here today on behalf of the two most important clients that I have. This is my daughter, Campbell. She's a sophomore at Atlee High School. This is my son, Cole. He's a 7th grader at Mechanicsville. Both of them have dyslexia, at Chickahominy in Mechanicsville, sorry. Both of them have dyslexia. If the tools and the resources that are included in this bill, had they been in place when these guys were a lot younger, we would have certainly been able to have some intervention, understand what was going on, would have made a big difference in their lives and in our lives. So for that reason, Mr. Chairman, we hope you all will act favorably on the bill. Thank you.
Great. Dr. Klein, do you have any wrapping up comments? Or?
No, Mr. Chairman, I would, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Greason.
Mr. Chairman, I applaud the patron on his work over the last several years and your work and the subcommittee's work. I have spent some time with the patron working on this as well, and I would move that we report the bill as amended.
So it's been moved and properly seconded that we report House Bill 2395 as amended. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Delegate Klein. I told you, Dickie, that would go pretty quick. All right. Delegate Bell, House Bill 1400.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, staff. House Bill 1400 is actually a third-generation bill of a bill that establishes the board of the Virginia Virtual School as a policy agency of the executive branch of state government for the purpose of governing full-time virtual school programs. This bill first appeared in 2015 as House Bill 324, was passed in the General Assembly, signed by the governor with a reenactment clause. It passed again last year as House Bill 8 and was vetoed by the governor. So we're back for what amounts to our annual review in appropriations, I suppose. Just briefly, if I could, on the fiscal impact, the total potential cost implications of this legislation are uncertain at this time due to a number of specific issues that need to be addressed, and the provisions of the bill have a delayed effective date of fiscal year 2020. The bill places a division-wide enrollment cap of 2% and statewide enrollment cap of 5,000 students on the school. It gets the average state share of the SOQ per pupil amount and per pupil share of the state sales tax funding and basic aid. The bill also provides that administrative costs of the school be borne proportionally by the school's approved multi-division online providers. The Auditor of Public Accounts does not anticipate a fiscal impact as a result of this bill. And because students enrolled in the school will not be counted in the calculation of the required local effort of the school division of residence, localities could experience a savings from students currently included in ADM who transferred to the school. Any actual fiscal impact to local school divisions resulting from this bill can't be determined at this time, mostly because of the delayed enactment. Mr. Chairman, there's I can say as much as you want. I'm very close to this bill. We've bonded over the years, and I know there are other people who will probably comment as well. So I'll stop there and be happy to answer any questions.
Dickie, are there any significant differences between this year's version and last year's version?
Bills are identical, sir.
I thought. Thank you very much. So we've been around this. Any questions from Delegate Greason?
Mr. Chairman, in the subcommittee where we heard this bill extensively, we summarized potentially the bill in 3 different category areas. One would be the mechanics of the bill and whether or not we thought full-time virtual was important to the Commonwealth. That was bucket number 1. Bucket number 2 was the constitutionality of the bill, and I'll come back to that in a second. And bucket 3 was the economics of the bill, thus it's up here. I think unanimously everybody in the subcommittee said, yep, virtual school is where we need to go, and so it kind of checked that box. Constitutionally, interesting, Mr. Chairman, there was a letter from the Attorney General's in 2013 that said that this identical bill was constitutional. And then there was a letter in 2017 from a new Attorney General that said this identical bill was not constitutional. And so the comments made there, Mr. Chairman, were let's wait until the next Attorney General and we might get another opinion. So we just checked that box as putting it aside and saying it could be, it might not, we think it is, and we're moving forward. And then obviously, Mr. Chairman, your subcommittee is talking about the economics. And so I think Delegate Bell has done a great job laying this bill out, and the economics are ones that we should stick to. And at the appropriate time, I'm ready to make a motion.
Yeah, on the economics, I'm a little bit familiar with school choice, and on the economics, these are, if you have a child in public education that's doing great in public education, you're going to leave that child in public education. If that child's not doing great in public education, then you're going to look for alternatives. And so that child is a child that's not doing well in public education. It may go to Dickie's full-time virtual school, and then I think the virtual school wins, the child wins, the local schools have a child that's been struggling coming out, they get to keep the local match, and they got a smaller classroom that they left behind. So I think these school choice pieces of legislation are all win-win-win for everybody. And so I commend Delegate Bell. Any other questions up here from anybody at the, is there, do you have a lot of people that would like to speak on this bill, Dick?
Mr. Chairman, to be honest with you, I don't know who might be here this morning.
Is there anybody in the audience who wants to speak in favor of this bill? Thumbs up from the Family Foundation in the back.
Mr. Chairman, Chris White with the Vector Corporation here on behalf of publicschooloptions.org. I know you all have heard this bill many times. We support it and hope you will act favorably upon it. Thank you.
Friend.
Mr. Chairman, Chris Friend Family Foundation in support of the bill for all the reasons you've heard many times before.
Thank you. Anybody want to speak in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, Stacey Haney with the Virginia School Boards Association. We're in opposition to the bill. I'd like to address something that the chairman just said. If we have a student who leaves a public school, we don't keep the local money. We only get local money for the students we have enrolled in our school. So we have a student who leaves to go to the virtual school. We lose the state money. We lose the local money. But we still have to have that classroom. We still have to have that teacher. We still have to operate that school bus, run the cafeteria, all the other things that go along. So it's going to have a significant impact for every student you take out of the public schools. So we would oppose the bill.
Ms. Haney, but the locality still maintains the money, correct?
Right. They don't send it to the school system.
I'm doing something. Okay.
Tom Smith, Superintendent Association. We are also opposed to the bill. We've talked about it a great deal over the last couple of years. I will reiterate what Stacey was saying. Having done school budgets for 25 years, if I go before the Board of Supervisors, they want to know how many children you have, and that's what they fund.
Anybody else to speak in opposition to the bill?
Kirby with the Virginia Education Association. For the reasons just stated, we oppose the bill.
Barry Weinstein with the Norfolk, Fairfax, and Hampton Federation of Teachers. We oppose the bill.
Anybody else want to speak in opposition to the bill? Dick, you have any wrap-up comments?
Mr. Chairman, I think it's clear that virtual education, full-time virtual education, is an idea whose time has come. We have seen several bills introduced this year addressing full-time virtual. We were there first, and I think we have a prototype that is a successful model for full-time virtual education in Virginia.
Thank you for all your hard work on this over the years, Dickie, and your persistence. So the bill's before the committee. Is there a second? So it's been moved and properly seconded that we report House Bill 1400. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? One opposed. Thank you, Delegate Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Delegate Bagby, I saw, there you are. Hard to miss. Delegate Bagby, you have House Bill 1923.
I do.
Delegate Bagby.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.